Hi everybody, welcome to the first video for the tutorial. This should be your first interaction with a tutorial with me. Hopefully by this point you have already gone through the tutorial by yourself and gone through the tutorial and completed the notes. If not, maybe you should go back and watch the video welcome to class that I've included and kind of see how I expect you to do things. What I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be taking you guys through a tutorial. And every time we have a tutorial, I'm going to do this. This first time I'm going to go a little bit slower than normal, and I'm going to cover a few things that I just kind of expect you to know for the rest of them about how to do certain things. And so this one might take a little bit longer than normal, but you should be watching this only after you've completed, gone through it once and gone through it and gotten your notes. I'm going to shrink it down just a little bit real fast and show you some things. Over here on the left hand side of the page, if you'll click this, it will show you like a table of contents. Now this table of contents doesn't show you every page, but it shows you the beginning of every particular section. And so if you need to get somewhere fast, this is it. This one does take you straight to the lesson activity and the summary, and I really don't see the point behind that one, but there are some things in here, just quick links. Okay, if you click the folder tab, you're going to get a glossary. Now this glossary takes you to a link that you probably ought to just print this out, but this particular link has all of the words that we're going to be using for the whole class. So it's the same glossary for the whole class. So if you just print this thing out once, you got it. So that's all that's going to be in that folder. There's a dictionary. You're welcome to look up a word. There is some reading tools, and I would encourage you to use these reading tools. They are very useful. Especially when you go through it first time on your own, you may want to have it read to you. I'm actually going to go to a page and give you an example of that. Let's just go right here real fast, and I'll give you an example of what it sounds like. I think you can hear it. If you'll press, hold on, just so you know how to turn it on. I turned it on by clicking on slide narration, and it gets you this little toolbar here. I don't know why that wasn't there to start with, and now the slide narration button's not on, but I'm going to just use this. If you click this, you're going to hear this guy. I don't know, it may be a different person every time, but they'll read to you every single page. Listen to this one.
In this lesson, you will describe forensic science and its role in the legal system.
Now this may help you, this may not. That's going to be totally up to you, and I think it'll just keep going. I don't know, but you might want it. If you struggle a little bit with English and you see a few words here and there that you don't understand, I really enjoy this particular feature. It lets you translate. Come on. It lets you well, come on. Words like criminalistics. What the heck is criminalistics? Well, you know what? We're going to paste it in here, and it should give you the Spanish version if you are if you speak another language, and I'm very thankful for that. Criminalistica. Okay? And then finally, and I like these are highlight tools, and you can use them like I have criminalistics highlighted. Now I can highlight it and keep it, and they'll stay there until you remove the highlights. So that's really nice as you're going through. Now if you go through this thing a few times like I tell you to, you're gonna notice that you'll pick this stuff up pretty quickly. So I hope you guys do that. Alright, so we're gonna go back to the beginning, and we're just gonna carry us through it. Hang on. So the beginning page looks like this. It always has a title. Then we always have an objective, and I like the objective because the objective tells you what to expect. In this case, you're going to describe forensic science and its role in the legal system. And then there's a few pages where usually I'm just going to skip them, but in this case, this tells you where you are. This is the table of contents, or the tutorial contents. I normally just skip these when I do the videos. There will be another one here. This video, I skip it, and then I go straight into the lesson. Another thing I'll skip usually in the video, because I try to keep it short, is any discussion of the questions that go along with this. Sometimes there are just little kind of get you questions to see, kind of bring you up to speed. I may or may not cover those. I usually don't, but I do usually talk about the activity. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on this activity and just follow along. If you did your notes, please have your notes out. And if you have your notes out, and you have some questions, you can jot them down. If there's something on here that you're confused about, you can certainly email me or text me or call me or Zoom with me. Just kind of add to your notes as we go through here. Anything that I add that you think is important, add to it. I do want to say this. I may have said this already, but students told me that this was their favorite class that took this from me first semester. So I hope you guys find this just as enjoyable. Let's just get started. Now, I don't read this stuff word for word. I kind of tell you, kind of break it down for you because you've already read it. You don't need me to read it to you, okay? But I will tell you that forensic science is not new. It's been around for a very long time. But forensic science is constantly being updated. It is constantly being improved upon, and we are learning and able to do more and more about finding out what really happened at a crime scene, which is the goal of forensics, because of our ability to do better investigation, better science, better measuring ability. Most of the time, forensic scientists try to find and prove that a person did it because a detective says this is the guy that did it, but we need some evidence, so the forensic science does that. But every once in a while they find themselves able to kind of prove someone's innocence, which is a really useful thing. So these aren't the bad guys. I consider these guys the good guys because they find the truth, and that's what's always important. And we're going to talk about all these techniques and little things that they do to to find out how that happened. I had the opportunity to speak to the forensic science team of the Okeechobee County Sheriff's Department, and they were such wonderfully interesting people, and I hope to share some videos of that with you soon because I videotaped it. Hang on. So we're going to start out talking about two different disciplines here. The first one is forensic science. We're going to compare that to criminalistics shortly. But forensic science has become a popular thing because you see it on TV all the time. In fact, a lot of you guys probably took this class because you like to watch things like CSI Miami or CSI New Orleans or CSI this or that, which are really good shows. But forensic science has a pretty broad focus. It focuses on more than just violent crime investigations. It focuses on lots of things. Criminalistics is very simply just on crimes and criminal investigations, but forensics opens itself up a little bit more. They may be used for law enforcement, legal attorneys. It is used in criminal investigations, civil law, trials. Sometimes it's not about a crime. Sometimes it's about a litigation case in which somebody is suing someone else for something that happened. So forensic science is a little bit more broad than criminal science, criminalistics. Forensic science is multidisciplinary, and I mean it covers, we're going to talk about a lot of this, but it covers all kinds of things like chemistry, biology, entomology, which is the study of bugs, physics, psychology. All these things come into play, and we're going to elaborate on these as we go, but if you're going to be a forensic scientist, you need to know a lot about all of this. Chemistry, biology, entomology, physics, psychology. I mean, it's pretty amazing. It's really strong application of all of these sciences. Now, there are several groups of this kind of thing, but this is basically the scientists and the technicians. Now, I want you to think of this as kind of like doctors and nurses. Doctors go to school for a very long time to perfect their craft. Nurses go to school for a while, and nurses are awesome, but they go to school for a lot less time, and so as a result, they have less knowledge, but they do work with the doctors to keep you healthy. Well, the forensic scientists and technicians are the same way. The scientist has studied forensics for a long time and is a specialist at it, but the technicians are really good at helping out, helping do the things like collecting the samples and stuff, and in a lot of cases they work very closely together. But the scientists are responsible for doing the intricate stuff. They have to keep the detailed logs. They have to pay attention to detail. They have to not make mistakes, because if so, then it can get thrown out in court. There's a lot of pressure at the scientist level and to maintain some integrity. Not that the technicians aren't professional. That's not what I'm trying to say. But there's a lot of pressure on the scientist level because they have the responsibility of being the person that should be able to do this very well. With modern law enforcement, forensic science is crucial because if a crime occurs and there's no witness left, how do you know what happens? Suppose you come up on a dead body in the middle of a field. How do you know what happened? I'm quite certain that if that dead body, if that person was murdered, the murderer usually doesn't come forward and say, "Oh, that was me, I did it, sorry." Sorry. You have to find this stuff out. And so forensic science labs are crucial, even for things in which the victim is still alive, like drug-related or sex crimes. It's also useful in civil law. Forensic scientists perform DNA tests to determine whether people are related for paternity suits, and for forgery, in case there was some type of in case you were duped into buying a fake painting, or you were handed a fake check or something like that. They also might help track accounting fraud, like people who embezzle money from companies. There's just all kinds of layers to forensic science. It's a pretty broad category. It doesn't just include criminal investigations, and it has its limits. The good news is these limits are continually being pushed by technology and technique, and just some really smart people. But for example, fingerprinting is as good as it is. It's still not perfect. What I found out from my people in Okeechobee County is that they don't have access to all of the databases. So when they have a fingerprint that they don't know what it is, they often have to pay an outside source to help them find where the fingerprint came from, because access to the databases just isn't nationwide or worldwide yet. And so if you've ever been fingerprinted, more than likely your fingerprint is in the database attached to your name. But if the forensic scientists don't have access to it, then, and here's a great story about that. If you've ever seen bite marks being used to help to convict a potential criminal, then what you find is that if you bite a soft area like your hand or your leg or something, that can be distorted. The hand might not have been in the same position as the bite was taken, and if you move the hand around, you can make the bite look very different. It's questionable, and so some of the science is not so sure we're going to use that. But there's a lot of other science that's involved with forensics that is much more precise, much more accurate, and so it has its limitations. Ballistics, for example, I can often tell you what kind of gun shot it. I can often tell you how close the gun was to the victim, but I'm not always able to tell you if it was the exact gun that you suspect. Hair examination, the same thing. There's no DNA on a strand of hair. Now there may be at the roots, but there's no necessarily. I can tell you what hair color they have, possibly whether they're male or female, possibly what kind of shampoo or conditioner they use, but it's still difficult to narrow it down to an actual person with just a single strand of hair. It can help though. This stuff is still used in law enforcement to testify. It's just not always enough. This may support other data or other clues that you have found. Now, criminalistics is a specific part of forensics, and in criminalistics you're studying crime scenes. This is where somebody's been murdered, something has been stolen, something has been destroyed, okay, where a crime was committed, usually violent crimes, okay. And criminalists are specialized in investigating these crime scenes, how to grab that gun and those bullet casings without damaging any fingerprint evidence or other types of evidence that's on it. They specialize in this. They usually have additional training in identifying, sorting, and comparing the evidence, and they almost always have a pretty, at least a bachelor's degree in physical, biological, forensic science, something, right? And they also can help to interpret the evidence, and that's one of the things that's important. That's one of the things that it didn't surprise me, but I found very interesting when I interviewed the ladies in Okeechobee County. Not only did they collect the evidence, but they also helped to interpret it. They would tell the detective, this is what we think happened. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. Yeah, so I'm going to give you this question because when I go through this, it gives me the answers. This is one of the reasons I don't show you these questions usually when I do the tutorial. But this is an assignment. You can't just skip past this. I check to see that you completed it. The computer tells me that you either completed this question or not. Okay, and I want to know. I want you to give it a shot. Sometimes they're short, such as just fill in the blank or multiple choice on this. Sometimes you have to work through them a little bit, but I need you to do these questions. They're crucial. Okay, now for a little bit of the history of forensic science. We can go all the way back to 275 BC. That's 300 years before Christ. And a guy named Archimedes he invented a method for measuring an object's volume. All right. Now, then he was called on to investigate whether the king of Syracuse's golden crown had been replaced with a forgery by the local goldsmith. So he was able to accurately measure the density of the crown, and he was able to determine based on its volume and its weight to determine its density to tell if it was gold. Okay. And as it turned out, he proved that the goldsmith actually had stolen the king's crown and replaced it with a forgery, and I'm sure the goldsmith was immediately executed in some gruesome manner, because that's how they did it back then. In 44 BC, the Julius Caesar had an autopsy performed on him to see what killed him. In the 8th century AD, that's 700 AD, somewhere right through there, Chinese people started collecting fingerprints to solve crimes. That's 1400 years ago, right? In 1247, the book, however you say that, or The Washing Away of Wrongs, was printed in China, and it detailed all kinds of forensic methods that would help solve crimes. And then the Dr. Bartolomeo de Varignana of Bologna convinced legal authorities to approve autopsies as part of criminal investigations as far back as 1302, 700 years ago. The Washing Away of Wrongs also provided the first guidelines for scientific investigators. It distinguished drowning from strangulation, and it relied a lot on science to determine guilt. And that's when this really idea of using science, just like Bartolomeo there, they used science to help determine what happened in a criminal investigation. In 1784, a murder was solved using only forensics. In this particular case, a torn piece of newspaper and the murder weapon, a pistol, matched the paper in the Englishman's pocket. So they figured out, they matched a piece of newspaper with a newspaper in the Englishman's pocket, and boom, he's convicted. That was forensics, 1784. When we hit the 1800s, 19th century technology had taken off. We were applying science left and right to this thing and learning so much more stuff. We could start doing chemical analysis, blood analysis, using all kinds of different chemicals and toxicology to do things. We were able to take photographs to document evidence. In 1888, forensic science helped identify the victims of Jack the Ripper. Okay, and so as time goes by, this gets even more and more impressive. 130 years ago, Jack the Ripper was convicted using forensic science, and today we do all kinds of stuff. I mean, think about what's famous to you. Do you remember hearing, I know this was before you guys were born, do you remember hearing about O.J. Simpson? And in the 20th century, we actually started to see it become a discipline in which it was taught in schools. And in 1902, this guy, the Swiss professor, he established forensic science as its own academic discipline, and it started being taught at universities. In the 1930s, criminal science caught on in the United States and around the world. And here in the U.S., we created the American Academy of Forensic Science in Chicago in the 1930s, and leading us all the way up to, even not that long ago. 1920, law enforcement started making bullet comparisons by using a microscope. So that was interesting. That was in 1920. In the 30s, they started comparing blood type. We were able to start understanding how blood type worked in the 30s. In 1975, the first microscope to look at cell structure was used to help in forensics. Now, we had microscopes and we'd looked at cell structure before, but this was the first time we used it in forensics, was in 75. In 84, we started using DNA a little bit. It was, well, let's go back to 75. We could look at the chromosomes inside of a cell and try to establish whether or not that was good enough, or whether or not we could link to a person by looking at their chromosomes. But in 84, we started looking at DNA, which is way more accurate than chromosomes. And it was used in paternity and identify criminals. Of course, in 94, we started to establish a DNA data bank, and this was really early. That was 27 years ago. And in 27 years, you just wouldn't believe how much more we're able to do with things like DNA and other toxicology and chemical analysis and things like that. It's amazing what we are able to do today with X-ray technology, voice print identification. It's pretty awesome. Now, today we have crazy stuff. DNA is so accurate today that we can tell so much about a person. We can definitely tell who the person is, but if we have DNA that we don't know what it is, we can tell a lot about the person, their age, where they, their ethnic history. There's so much we can tell. And so how about this? How about we can scan bones, put those bones into the computer, and actually have the computer do reconstruction of what the face would look like if you had a skull. We also have the AFIS, the Automated Fingerprint Identification System, which is very useful if you have access to it. DNA sequencers, just it's incredible. And then on the horizon, we're doing things like when we take a picture of a crime scene now, it becomes a 3D holographic image that we can then put on glasses and re-explore as a 3D holographic environment. I've even heard that they're starting to put it together to where if you take pictures of a crime scene, have the computer put it together, you can take the jurors through the crime scene by showing it to them in 3D while they wear glasses. I mean, and this is on the horizon. What's further down the road? So just like a lot of science, the technology and the technique that is involved with forensic science has developed immensely, and it's really come a long way in what we're able to do and discover about a crime scene. In the early 1800s, a guy named Mathal Orfila became the father of modern toxicology. He was the first guy to figure out how to use chemistry to discover some things such as arsenic being found in a murder victim's bloodstream or in their body. In the late 1800s, Francis Galton was a geneticist who published papers on how to use things like heredity to profile fingerprints, and we still use that classification system for the fingerprints today. So he's kind of the guy who first started us on fingerprints. And in the late 1800s, another guy named Dr. Joseph Bell was a Scottish surgeon, and he taught Arthur Conan Doyle, who invented Sherlock Holmes, but he was able to diagnose patients and guess their professions at first sight based on just observations. So there was a lot of profiling and psychology that came out of that. And then of course the deductive reasoning that Holmes is so famous for. Another person in the late 1800s was Alphonse Bertillon. That's not him, that's just showing physical comparisons there. But he was a French policeman, and he studied biometrics. Now biometrics is the study of the measurements of the body, okay? And so he was able to do forensic examination. Bertillon was the first guy to forensically examine documents like forgeries and signatures or things like that. He also used what they call galvanoplastic compounds, what's really just kind of like plaster of Paris, to pour up into footprints and ballistics in order to preserve evidence. Edmond Locard was he was a Sherlock Holmes of France, which he wasn't really Sherlock Holmes, but he created the basic principle of forensic science, which states that every contact leaves a trace. So he was one of the first full-fledged people to be a forensic scientist. And then Calvin Goddard was a forensic scientist from Maryland who pioneered ballistics, the study of the bullet in firearms. So that was in 1955. Well, he died in 1955, so it was in the early 1900s. So your lesson activity for this week is to conduct a little bit of online research about new developments in forensic science, and then write me just a little presentation about it, read the instructions, and then there's self-evaluation. Now you have to do this. If you don't do this, you don't get credit for the tutorial, and the tutorial is all of your homework. It's worth 30% of your grade if you remember. So make sure that you do this and do it well so that I can give you full credit for it. All right, this was really short. They're never this short, but it's just an introductory chapter, and I want you guys to get this done, get your notes done, get ready for the mastery test, which is going to be in the calendar. All right, good luck and get to work.